So you're probably saying now, oh my God, she's going to be talking about reality. Reality? Well, the problem is that science in general is almost always talking about reality, but it's kind of like the was it the 300-pound gorilla in the room? There's this odd belief that underlies much of science, and then the way that science is then used by others and by the public and by scientists in other professions, in other areas, and not the one where the research is done, that something is being said about something real. Now, to us, we're going to just give you an alert, and we're going to deal with this later on, and we will be able, I hope, to show you how it is that the brain and the understanding that neuroscience gives us of the brain allows us to eventually have a different notion of reality and one that's more useful in then understanding how the brain works. The two aspects of this feed each other and support each other. So for now, just put this in your back pocket and we'll go along with the rest of the conversation about these scientists. Reality is not something that to us refers to anything. It has a use. It's a useful word. There are a lot of useful words, but they don't refer to anything. And Wittgenstein, one of the only philosophers to whom we really lend any significant credence, always emphasized the meaning of words and its use. So when we use the word reality, and even when it's silently being used in a lot of our statements, it has a purpose, but it does not refer to anything. If I can give an example of how this what might work, and we'll try to show this later on, consider the number zero. In fact, consider whether you believe it's a number or not. Now, zero is very important. It's part of the system of numbers. Without it, we wouldn't really do such a good job counting or understanding how all of the numbers relate to each other. But you cannot point to zero, and zero is something else than a countable integer. So for us, reality is very much like the concept of zero. It's there all the time if you really want to think about it. It's an identity element. So 1 plus 0 is 1. 2 plus 0 is 2. So every integer is in some way in the backdrop has 0 in the backdrop. Now, this is a much more interesting and detailed notion that we will expand on later. But just consider that when we deny the reference of reality, we are not speaking as idealists or locked up in our minds. We're simply pointing out that it has a use that's very different than one that refers to an integer. Although we take zero for granted in our sophisticated modern world, it was thousands of years before the intuition even emerged to the point where it could be clearly articulated that zero was something to be spoken about, something to be written. There was no symbol for it. There was no way to mark the spot where there was not something that you were counting. There was the presence of a non-integer, nothing. And there was no way to mark that. But it wasn't exactly nothing, because zero is saying something, isn't it? Because there's a big difference between saying zero and total silence. So this is the way the reality as a concept is used as we see it, and it has to be used implicitly to make various statements and to do a lot of the work of science. But when it starts to be talked about as if it's something on its own, as referring to that supposed reality, which we'll go back now, we can go back in our next segment to Aristotelian times and find out how what we're doing now when we talk about reality, the way we're talking about it, is very much poor Aristotle 2,000-3,000 years more than 2,000 years ago was understanding the world and was trying to misunderstand the world in his very curious metaphysics. We're still there when we start thinking and speaking as if we're talking about something, as opposed to using a very important concept, reality.